Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, a podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Sarah Kleiner at Carnivore Yogi on Instagram returns to the Carnivore Cast for the second time. Check out part 1, where we spoke about finding veganism, losing 100 pounds 3 times, her journey to find and experiment with carnivore, and more. Sarah is a yoga instructor, autism mother, and meditation support group leader for parents with children with autism. Sarah is also an ex-vegan, healing from PCOS, adrenal fatigue, depression, IBS, and eczema. And as I mentioned, again, she lost 100 pounds 3 separate times in her life. I just can't get over that. Sarah shares amazing, honest, practical, and helpful content on her Instagram page and YouTube channel, which I've really enjoyed. Welcome back to the show, Sarah.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here. And, it was awesome. I just had you on my YouTube channel, so I feel like I'm getting spoiled to talk with you like twice in a month now.
Yeah, that was really fun. And I've enjoyed your YouTube channel so much, following along your personal journey. It's inspired me to start making a few YouTube videos myself. Yeah. So it's been really fun. Nice. So I'd love to just start with, as I said, folks should definitely check out your first episode. It's one of my favorites. Can you give people context on where you are in your carnivore journey and kind of a brief overview?
Yeah. So I started carnivore over 2 years ago. It was kind of like the last house on the block. It sounded a bit extreme to me, but I had a friend of mine who was a doctor who was doing it. And I said, all right, she's doing it. It must be safe if she's doing it. And so right away, I got relief from, I was not able to do yoga. I had stopped practicing really because I was in so much pain. And right away, within the first month, my joint pain, all that inflammation went away, IBS, all that went away. And I've been able to stay off of medication still for depression, anxiety, and sleep, which is something I had struggled with for my whole life also. So totally 100% medication free still, which is amazing. And I've switched to doing a high fat version of carnivore. I started running into some problems after year 1, which I've been really honest with about on my YouTube channel. Not really popular opinion because I feel like everyone really wants this easy cookie cutter carnivore. And sometimes that works for people, but the more that I've been on YouTube and Instagram, the more I'm seeing that it's not a cookie cutter approach that's going to work for a lot of people. And I definitely fell into that category where I started, I just heard this interview with Zofia Clemens, who I think you've had on your podcast before. But she was saying the problem with carnivore for a lot of people, and I think this is what I ran into at the end of year 1, is that they're not really in ketosis and that they're still in a glucose metabolism. And really that starts to stress out the body after about, everyone is going to have an amount of time where it's going to bother them that, could be a few years. For me, it was about a year. So I started having some issues with my sleep. And, but I was feeling so good on the other way, respects of carnivore that I decided to try doing a high fat approach. I had quit doing I was doing a lot of fasting also in that first year. I'm no longer fasting at all anymore. I haven't for a year now. And that's been a really good decision for me. So I've been doing this high fat version of carnivore for almost a full year now. And it's been really magic for my body, for my hormones. I had, as I mentioned, kind of run into some hormonal issues, doing carnivore for a year, too much gluconeogenesis, too much fasting, and lost my cycle. I'm kind of the person now people reach out to on Instagram and YouTube. I heard you in this Facebook group that you lost your cycle on carnivore. So I get messages like that constantly from people. And so I'm like, yeah, this is what I had to do. I had to stop fasting and I had to go super high fat. And that really fixed it for me. So that's what I've been doing for the last year. I've kind of started exploring, playing around with microbiome, done some gut testing. I just did 90 days of a gut healing protocol that Nutrition with Judy helped me with that involves some probiotics and some other things. And so this week, I actually just sent off another sample to see if there were some positive changes in my gut bacteria. So I'm interested to see what that looks like because I stayed strict carnivore for that 90 days and did her protocol. But I'm kind of interested now in some foods, adding some foods back in, testing some stuff out. And so that's kind of where I'm at with my journey now. I'm kind of sliding away towards being like this, super strict carnivore. And I'm more interested, you mentioned it in the beginning, I've lost 100 pounds 3 times. I'm really interested in working with the food addiction side with, why someone would lose 100 pounds 3 times. Because the more I stick around in the community, the more and more I see people losing weight, regaining weight. And so I want to focus a little bit more on that, dive a little deeper into those aspects also.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And thank you for sharing that, Sarah. There's so much I want to unpack there. And I similarly had trouble with cookie cutter carnivore. And a lot of those problems, to your point, don't come up until you're a year or more in. Mm-hmm. And you can be doing everything wrong and still find a lot of early awesome results, which is what I think is so great about this diet. You mentioned still having relief from all those things, even though the way you were doing carnivore ultimately didn't work well for you for other reasons. Like when I started carnivore back in 2016, I talk about this all the time. There just weren't resources out there at all, other than the Zeroing In on Health group, but I didn't find it. And so there were no books. There's no Sean Baker, Paul Saladino, MeatRx, your YouTube channel, Judy, all these things. And so I ate, pounds and pounds of ground beef, and I ate all the rendered fat that came with it, all the tallow. Mm-hmm. And I was getting sick. I was fasting a lot. I was eating a lot late in the day. And, having a lot of the problems that you talk about as well. And, I definitely wasn't in ketosis. I was eating over 400 grams of protein a day easily. And I think there are advantages and disadvantages to a high fat versus a high protein approach. But one disadvantage of the high protein is it definitely is metabolically stressful. To make your body have to create all its energy from glucose. And I don't think that's a supply driven process. Sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a rant here. I don't think it's like you dumped all this protein on yourself, therefore you have to produce more energy from glucose. Like you're dumping all these bricks off and then they have to be processed. It's more so that you're not eating enough fat or carbs. Therefore, the energy has to come from somewhere else. And so it has to come from protein. So your body has to work harder to make that energy resource for you.
I agree with you on that. And, like I said, I heard Sophia Clemens talk about it. I've also heard Chris Masterjohn talk about it. It's not so much talked about directly in the carnivore community. I've been talking about it a lot and I get a lot of flack for talking about this, but I agree with you 100%. Like it's not an efficient metabolic process to be in the majority of the time. That's kind of the conclusion I've drawn from this. Yeah.
You're almost tying your hands behind your back. You have these two energy sources and you're saying, nope, I'll have neither of those. So that's great. And it's really cool to hear that you've made adjustments. One thing I want to talk about, I want to dive into the high fat carnivore, but I want to talk about how you do high fat carnivore, because this is something I've learned a lot from your videos about, like how to make this work. Because I think the reason so many people run into these problems is because doing high protein carnivore is just more intuitive. It's easy to cook a lot of steaks, eat a lot of meat, and just like naturally, when you do that, even if you're selecting ribeyes and the fattier cuts, when you grill them, when you cook them in the pan, a lot of the fat cooks out. And you're probably ending up at 60 to 70% of your calories from protein. So how do you actually make your meals, your diet high fat? What are some of the things you do?
Yeah. So I'm actually this Sunday, I'm doing a little high fat carnivore diet masterclass because everyone always is like, how in the world this is, and I have all the videos to try to explain it. But it does take some kind of weighing and measuring to figure out what's going to work for you. And I divide it into 3 meals. And sometimes I'll have a little something in between the meals. Not always, but typically for breakfast, I'll have like an ounce or two of liver with butter. Now, butter is for me the best, my favorite fat source. But when I actually first started doing high fat carnivore, I couldn't tolerate butter. It would give me really bad headaches. I was still kind of working with histamine stuff, which I've worked really hard to get my histamine stuff so that I can tolerate butter. I can tolerate bone broth and all kinds of other stuff now, and leftovers. But when I first started high fat carnivore, my histamine issues were really bad. So I was having to I loved beef suet. Now, some people can't stand it, but I love beef suet. And so I was just eating a ton of beef suet. So I'd have like an ounce or two of liver, whatever meat I was having, and then measure out suet. And you really have to have, when you're doing this approach in the beginning, and now I don't weigh and measure now because I'm just really, I can be intuitive about it. But you do have to weigh out your meat and you do have to weigh out your fat. And then you have to use like an app like Carb Manager or MyFitnessPal to type that stuff in. And then you really want, for me, I did 90% fat and 10% protein for about 6 months solid, which I don't think everyone needs to go up that high. I think a lot of people can benefit from just 80% fat, 20% protein, or 85-15. But for me, I just want to make sure I got everything working where it was, really got my blood sugar stabilized, get my body out of kind of stress mode. And it was really helpful. But yeah, it does take kind of like weighing things out, measuring things out. And I used beef fat also. I love just frozen beef fat out of the freezer. You can also fry it up in your air fryer, put it in a skillet. So for me, it's like really tasty, but it's not intuitive. Like when I was doing carnivore before, I was just like, I'll have some burger patties and some bacon, or fry up some eggs and have eggs and a steak, and that was easy. But again, it just, after a while, it stopped working for me. I stopped feeling good.
Yeah, totally understand that. And you mentioned the blood glucose and other forms. It seems like you run a lot of experiments with yourself, and you're really good at objectively measuring them, documenting them, and then sharing them back out with people, which I think so many people get tons of value from. I personally do. Can you talk about some of your methods and both the tools and just like how you think about, okay, I'm going to test this new thing, whether it's cutting out of food or changing your macros? Like, how do you think about setting it up, what you're going to measure, what you're going to test, what you're going to look out for?
Yeah, it's kind of evolved to what the need of the time is really, because I came across NutriSense before I had switched over. They're who I do my continuous glucose monitoring through. And I contacted them. I was like, can I work a deal with you where I'll like post all my stuff online and get they were like, okay, sure. So I do have an affiliate relationship with NutriSense now, but I still buy my monitors, but I kind of started working a relationship with them out of curiosity because I was starting to have issues where I was waking up a lot at night. And this is when I was still doing standard carnivore. So my first experiment was putting on a continuous glucose monitor. And I saw during the day, my numbers were like pretty steady, 70s, 80s. But in the night, I would have a climb. It would go all the way up to like 130, sometimes a little higher. Yeah. And then the next morning, I'd wake up and my fasted numbers would sometimes be like high 90s, close to 100. And so that's when I was like, and I was already having all these other symptoms. And so that's when I started getting really interested in like CGMs and like, okay, there's something going on. And then I ran into, for my YouTube channel, I interviewed Stephanie Keto Person. And she's one of these people, a lot of people can't stand her. And she's very outspoken. She's been around for 14 years doing strict keto. So she was like saying, this is what I'm seeing people, because people go to her for consultation. She said people are doing carnivore and they're having these issues with their blood sugar. So if you want to keep doing carnivore, we were just talking after I interviewed her, she's like, you're going to have to do a high fat approach. And so she kind of helped me figure out how to do it. And so that was again when I tried another continuous glucose monitor, and I didn't have that same issue. My blood sugar was very stable, and it stayed stable through the night. It was like a nice hum through the night. And so that is one. And then when I switched to high fat and was doing the butter, she's also the one that was like, if you want to know if you have an issue with butter, number one, I was having the headaches, but I would also test my blood sugar. And if I didn't have the CGM on, I'd use a Keto Mojo or just a glucometer to I would test my blood sugar before I would eat. And this is how you know you have an intolerance. If it's a histamine intolerance, typically this will happen for people, or food intolerance. If it's a low carb food, like a fat should not raise your blood sugar. But I would test my blood sugar before I would eat the butter. And then I would test it 20 minutes later and then 2 hours later. And what Stephanie told me, and what I do, what I help people do is like, if you have a 20, 30 point, if it goes up, then you have some kind of a food intolerance. And for me, it was histamine. So that is how I help people kind of figure out, or if they're eating too much protein, the same thing can happen. Not always though. The CGM usually is the thing that'll tell you, if you're having those spikes in the night. I see that's really, really common for people, because gluconeogenesis is a slow process. It doesn't usually just spike right away. But I use the blood meter. I've been playing around with, hair mineral testing recently. That's been interesting. What else have I done? Oh, the gut health testing, to test microbiome. So yeah. And I try to just, anytime I figure something out, I just make a video about it. And sometimes people get mad with my results. I get a lot of dislikes, but most people are grateful and interested in kind of me sharing the data.
A lot of people ask me about how to make liver more tasteful and how to cook it or incorporate other organ meats on carnivore. Optimal Carnivore can help you do just that with their grass-fed organ complex. It was created by carnivores for carnivores. They start by sourcing 100% grass-fed organ meats from New Zealand, gently freeze-drying the organs and encapsulating them into convenient bovine gelatin capsules. Just 6 of these capsules a day is the same as eating an ounce of raw organ meat. I personally take these every single day, as does my wife. Even though we both eat liver and other organ meats, our ancestors would have eaten the whole animal. And this unique blend has 9 different organs, including beef liver, brain, thymus, kidney, spleen, etc. And I think it's great to get a daily dose of these organs when you can. So it covers all your bases, whether you're at home or traveling. What's also cool is they plant a tree for every product sold, which helps the environment. So visit www.optimalcarnivore.com/carnivorecast and use the code carnivore10 to receive 10% off your purchase. Thanks, and back to the show.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's great for you to put that out there. And let's talk about gut health a little bit. I had a lot of gut issues on carnivore. For me, and actually what prompted me to start adding foods back into my diet, carbohydrates, is I found I could not tolerate more than 150 grams of fat a day for a sustained period on carnivore, whether it was coming from beef suet, egg yolks, fatty meats, butter, whatever. I tried it all. I would feel awesome doing a higher fat version of carnivore for a few days. And then like clockwork, after 2 to 3 weeks of doing it, I would, in the middle of the night, get really, really bad bloating in my stomach and this incessant burping, like all this gas production. And I actually worked with Judy, and she was very helpful in introducing me to certain probiotics, and trying to avoid certain supplements and keeping my water away from meals, certain things to help my gut health. But ultimately what I found is, as an active mid-20s male, late 20s now, I needed, 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day just to maintain my body weight. And if you do the math, if you can only eat 150 grams of fat a day, that's a lot of protein. It's like 750 grams of protein. Oof. So I was like, okay, I have to add back carbs. And that's how I logically arrived at that. But I'm curious for you, what have been some of your learnings along the way with gut health? What are some of the protocols you've tried and how has it helped you?
Yeah. I mean, so what I've learned has been really interesting. I did a gut health test with Thrive. And I found out that my microbiome actually has, and I just interviewed for my podcast that'll be out next week, Kieran from Microbiome Labs, who is on Judy's channel. So we could talk more in depth about this. So it was kind of selfish, but I found out that I have bacteria in my gut that makes my body hold on to weight, which makes me basically be heavier or struggle to maintain a weight. So I know with me, there's a food addiction thing that I have to keep that at bay, but also to know, like, it hasn't been easy for me to maintain a normal weight for the last 10 years. I have not regained the weight and all that, but it's been hard. It's been a struggle. So I found out that I had this bacteria that makes my body hold on to weight. This is a scientific thing that they're showing now. I decided I was going to try, I did a food reintroduction back in like October before I had even talked with Judy, and I had a really bad reaction to it. And it caused like skin issues. And so that's kind of how I came to the conclusion. And then also talking with Judy and some other folks that carnivore, I think, can give people, and Kieran, when I spoke with him also, we dove into this. It's like, carnivore can give you so much benefit because you don't have all those reactions all the time. So it brings all your inflammation, everything way down because you've taken out the foods that you're reacting to. But a lot of people, their gut wall doesn't heal. There's still damage in the gut. I mean, and I had a lot of prior damage to my gut before carnivore from years of pharmaceuticals, like years of medications. I had some alcohol abuse, also lots of alcohol. I mean, I'm 41. So there were a lot of years of drinking and not treating myself right, antibiotics, poor sleep, stress, all that stuff plays into the health of your gut wall. And so what I basically discovered is that even though I had been doing carnivore all this time, I did not have a healed sealed up gut wall, and there was still bacteria in my gut that was causing me to hang on to excess weight and struggle to maintain my weight, among other things. There are other things in there too that were interesting. Like I found out that my protein handling was crappy. Like I can handle my carb handling and my fat handling is really, really good. But my protein handling sucks, which is very interesting, which is also probably why I do better with a lower protein, higher fat approach. So there was a lot that I found out in that. And now, like I said, I just sent off a sample to see, what 90 days is going to do using Judy's gut health, just basically the probiotics. And then I went and did some other stuff with the Microbiome Labs products, a product called Mega Mucosa that'll help you heal your gut lining, a prebiotic. So I went a little step further than Judy's stuff also, but it's going to be interesting to find out. But that's another thing that has me interested to reintroduce foods, because the other thing that the microbiome test said is that, there's certain foods that can help you with these different strains of bacteria that either you're deficient in or you have an overgrowth of, and that you could do it keto, because I'm not interested really in, eating sugar, eating fruit, any of that stuff. I might be okay with some starchier veg, but, I'm really still interested in staying ketogenic because that's just really how I feel my best. But that's why I'm kind of interested to trial out some foods like asparagus and avocado and garlic and just some green stuff to help with that gut bacteria. So it's, the experiment continues.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And have you, within the more carnivore framework, have you found different foods work better or worse for you in terms of energy, gut health, satiety, like things like you mentioned organs. So you're obviously still including those, but organs, eggs, bone broth. Were you ever drinking coffee? Are you drinking coffee now? How does some of those things affect you?
Yeah. So I quit drinking coffee almost a year ago, and that's been really helpful. Like really, really helpful. I was a big coffee addict and I would drink it black too. So I sleep a lot better. I feel a lot better. My energy is a lot more consistent without the coffee. It was definitely a hard addiction to break. But I definitely feel better without the coffee. With the histamine intolerance that it kind of developed. I mean, I had histamine issues before carnivore, but they had kind of been at bay for a while, but then they just kind of popped back up again. And so I had to stop all bone broth and I had to switch over to meat broth for a while. I'm slowly adding a little more bone broth in. I'm fine with it. And then when the histamine stuff was really bad, I had to take out egg whites and just do yolks only for a while because the whites were making me nauseous. I've been slowly doing a little egg white. Like this morning I had some egg white, well, not egg whites. I had scrambled eggs, just the whole egg for breakfast and with a little bit of liver. Yeah. And I love organ meats. They make me feel really a lot better, honestly. I know a lot of people say you don't need them and you never have to eat them, but honestly, optimal for me is going to be organ meats, thymus. I don't like kidney, but it is helpful for histamine intolerance, liver, egg yolks, yeah, and meat broth.
Yeah, that's great. I've found similarly that long term I don't do well with high amounts of bone broth, and I actually went from on the carnivore diet. So interesting, it may have been increased cortisol state, the high amount of protein. I find a lot of people have two things happen when they switch over to carnivore. One is I feel so much energy and I'm waking up now way before my alarm. And that's not always a good thing. It can mean like you're in a super high cortisol state. And then they're like, I don't need as much coffee. And I think there's a couple things going on there. I do think carnivore is probably making you feel better and have more energy. But I also think you're in this kind of like primitive hunting, my body is deplete of energy and nutrients, need to find food, high cortisol state.
Yes.
And so for me, I pretty instantly noticed that I could decrease my caffeine consumption. And then like you, with like an Oura ring and trying for years, it's still a constant battle to improve my sleep. I found that through 23andMe, I have the double rare allele for the CYAP12 gene, whatever it is, the caffeine metabolism gene.
Oh, yes.
So I'm an ultra slow metabolizer. So when people say like the average half-life of caffeine is 6 hours, in ultra slow metabolizers, I found one study that I think quantifies it, and it's like over 24 hours. So if I have a cup of coffee at 9 a.m., by 9 a.m. the next day, it's still like almost half in my system.
Wow.
So I went from coffee to cold brew because the acidity of hot coffee was bothering me, and cold brew has a lot less acid. And then eventually to caffeine pills, and then eventually to nothing. And now I've been, over 3 years, I think, without any caffeine. And it's been great. I feel awesome.
Yeah. I remember when you did some solo episodes talking about coming off coffee. And I remember listening to that and being like, no, I can't. Yeah. But it put that in my mind of like, cause I have done the 23andMe, but it's been a while since I've looked at any of that stuff. So I'd be willing to bet money I have also that same exact gene, because I've always been somebody, when I did drink coffee, I was like no coffee past 9 a.m. and I could only have like 1 cup because it really, and I would never drink like a caffeinated beverage after 9 a.m. because I just knew I was going to mess with my sleep. So I think I probably have that gene also.
Yeah. It's crazy how much it can affect you. And Sarah, you've also done some experiments with and documented a bit about cold therapy and exercise. Mm-hmm. And obviously you practice yoga a lot, but how do those two fit in with your health, and what have you found works well for you on both of those fronts?
Yeah. So funny, the cold therapy. I actually just I put out a podcast today with Dr. Mindy Pelz where we talked about this because, and she said this and I was like, oh my gosh, because I'm just somebody who overdoes it. I mean, that's just me. That's probably why I was drawn to veganism, probably why I was drawn to carnivore. I just overdo it. And I now at 41 years old can kind of laugh at it. Like, okay, this is what I do. And I have to proceed with caution, please. But I did that with cold therapy and I loved it. I mean, I was like addicted to it. It felt so good. I have a vest that you can wear. It's called Cool Fat Burner. And I was studying all the science on how you turn your white fat brown. And so I had this vest that I would wear, and then I would take cold showers, and then I would do cryotherapy. My blood glucose, whenever I would wear the cold vest, would drop usually by about 20 points. And so I would have a 20-point drop and I would feel like euphoric and it was amazing. But the thing that Dr. Pelz was saying is that, women, we need to be careful about how we fast, how we do carnivore, and how we do cold therapy, because it's a stressor. We don't think about these things as a hermetic stress, that yes, it can create cell death and autophagy and all that. But if you're doing it at a time when your body is working really hard to produce certain reproductive hormones, then it can be too much of a stress and it can make you sick. So I directly correlated getting really sick, my immune system just getting knocked way down, getting really sick, to doing too much cold therapy. So I kind of stopped for a while after that. And what Dr. Pelz was saying, women days 1 through 10 of their cycle, cold therapy, awesome. During ovulation, don't do it. Then the few days after that, cool. PMS week, don't do it. So it's same thing as with fasting. We have to, as women, and I didn't know this because I was just fasting constantly all the time because it felt so good and I was addicted to it and it was awesome. I just did it all the time and I ended up wrecking my hormones. And so I can maybe be the example for other people. And I think men also, need to look out for these things also. Women, I think it's a little bit more complicated because our bodies make babies, but I just kind of word of caution, this stuff's awesome and it can be really helpful and can give you great benefits, but you want to do it in a way that's optimized, and you don't want to do it every single day.
Yeah, it's really easy to stack those stressors. And I think you made a point about yourself, but just people who are drawn to these types of diets are often extreme, CrossFitters or fasters or things like that. And it's really easy to pile those things on top of each other. And I get really concerned when people contact me and say, I'm eating 1,200 calories. I'm stalled. I'm working out 12 hours a week. I fast and do OMAD. And it's like a young woman. And I'm like, man, you just really got to let your body rest a little bit. Like, why do you think you need to eat less and less?
I get those people too. And it makes me really sad, and honestly, I gained weight when I quit fasting, and I'm 15 pounds heavier than I was. And I didn't want to gain any weight. It didn't have like a negative place to store it. But I have gained 15 pounds and I have not lost it in the last year because I really screwed myself up from all the fasting, from doing it too much. Luckily I have a regular cycle and I ovulate every month now, but far too many women now. I get them too. I get them in my DMs constantly. And the thing that really makes me upset is that they pay $500 for a consult here, $500 here, and they're going and looking for all these people to help them, when what they need to understand is that they've put their body into such a stressed out state that your body is smart. It wants to keep you alive. And you basically put your body into safe mode. And it's not a matter of doing more fasting or more exercise. In fact, if you do that, you're probably going to make the problem worse. So what they don't really want to hear this, but you got to quit all of that stuff, allow your body to regain a sense of safety. And that's not, and I can't give you a timeline of how long. Like I said, it's been a year for me that I've gained 15 pounds and I didn't have it to gain, in my opinion. But I know I still have some body dysmorphia stuff, but, I didn't feel like I had it to gain and it hasn't come off. And I tried to calorie restrict back in September. And, cause I thought, I've been doing this, eating more food and no fasting since, February, and I'm in September. So I can do a little calorie restriction. Ended up going to the doctor, getting some blood work done, and found out my T3 was low, and I had previously fixed it. So it was back in normal range, and boom, a little bit of calorie, not even much calorie restriction, just maybe 300 calories a day or so. And boom, T3's low. Good news is it's back to good graces here again in January. But yeah, it's, my body wasn't ready to take the weight off, and it may not be for a bit of time. And I've got to just be okay with that, because it's about health. We're so focused on being thinner and being more ripped,
Yeah, that can be really tough. And sometimes, just like you said, you have to take a step backwards, 2 steps backwards to take 3 steps forward. And it can require a lot of patience. And you mentioned losing your cycle. And there's been a lot of debate, and I'm not asking you to take a firm stance, but just because I'm not an expert on this at all, I'd love to hear your opinion on, some people say women, when they lose their cycle, when they have amenorrhea, it's because they need carbs and you have to add carbs back in. You haven't taken that approach. So what are some of your thoughts around that general topic?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from my experience, and then I'm connected with a lot of other carnivore ladies as well, who have had healthy pregnancies, been able to get successfully pregnant. Me losing my cycle, getting it back. I had to eat a lot of fat though. And I've heard Amy Berger talk about this before of women, if you lose your cycle or you're having hormonal problems, you got to eat a lot of fat. And some women are just not willing to do that. And there is sometimes some weight gain that comes along with that. So yeah, I think that if you're, and I don't have experience with the eating carbs to get the cycle back thing and weight gain. I know some people who did that, took that route, and decided to eat carbs. They also gained weight to get their cycle back because it is, again, your body's just in shutdown mode. You're in safe mode. And to get out of that, you have to allow your body to feel safe again. So you may need to gain some weight. But for me, it was just needing to go all the way up to, 90% fat, 10% protein, quit all the fasting, sometimes eat before bed at 9:00 at night. And I slept better, because it was fat. It wasn't protein, so that's my stance on it. And everyone has to figure out what works right for them. But I think that women that say you have to have carbs to get your cycle back, that just literally has not been my experience. And like I said, I have some carnivore ladies I'm affiliated with that have had struggles with fertility and gotten pregnant doing a high fat carnivore. And so yeah, I can't say emphatically you need carbs or you don't, but I know that I did not. So.
Yeah, it's great to hear that you've been able to have success, and you've seen a lot of success with people who haven't had to do that. Because a lot of people are worried about that. They're conflicted and scared. I can understand that. Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about family members and the diet? How do you think about your daughter and feeding your daughter, and how has a meat-based diet worked for her? Because I'm always fascinated to hear that, and especially some of the mental health aspects of it, and just how you think about how people should think about trying to encourage their family members to do the diet, or dealing with the fact that their family members may object to their carnivore diet.
Yeah, it's, my husband still has green smoothies every morning for breakfast. He says he feels really good. I mean, he looks good. He works out every day. He's 6'4". He's in great shape. So wow. I'm like, cool, that's your deal. He does cringe a little bit when he sees all the bacon that I'm cooking. He's still, even all this time later, seeing everything I've been through. He still has bias, and he loves me to death. He loves my daughter also. So any of his bias, he's just kind of out of concern. He's like, "Oh, you're eating all that fat. It's going to, clog your arteries." And so then I'm like, "Oh my God," because he doesn't watch my stuff. Like, he doesn't watch my channel. He doesn't, and I don't want him to either. I kind of would rather keep I don't like any of my friends in my personal life to know anything about what I do online. Like, if they find it, it's an accident. And I'm like, oh, this is awkward. Now I got to explain this whole thing.
It's the same way.
I don't want people in my personal life to know about all this stuff, because it creates so many awkward conversations. Mm-hmm. But yeah, my husband, it's still interesting, but he's seen like my hormonal health get so much better. So he kind of can't argue with it at this point. Yeah. With our daughter though, we did switch her keto in March, and we saw a major behavior change when she went keto. Just a lot more calm, a lot more regulated, a lot less OCD, better sleep, just so much for her. People probably know, if they know me, that she's non-speaking autistic. And she has her own YouTube channel. We did a whole episode on her YouTube channel where she was spelling about how much better she was feeling on keto, like some of the changes that she saw. Yeah, it was awesome. But, one thing that has really shifted how I think about how I feed her and how I want to nurture her is speaking with Dr. Elizabeth Bright, who really talks about how women need fat and how especially girls in puberty need fat. And it just builds their hormones for the rest of their life. And so with my daughter, I'm not afraid to let her have extra butter if she wants it. She'll eat a carnivore bar. She loves the carnivore bars that Philip Mises carnivore bars. Oh my gosh.
So good.
We go through like 2 boxes a month of those.
Wow.
And I have to like hide them. I literally have to hide them like I would hide candy. But she'll eat one of those with like butter on top. So I literally just let her eat fat as much as she wants. And she likes it, we don't do sugar really. Occasionally we'll get a keto something or other for her, but I feel like it makes her life easier.
That's awesome.
And I feel like I'm doing the right thing for her also. So a lot, and one thing Dr. Bright said that just blew me away. When girls hit puberty, a lot of them get stretch marks, and a lot of it is because they don't have adequate fat in their diet. So my daughter is like well into puberty, 0 stretch marks. I'm like, what? So it could be coincidence, but she has a whole book about it. And I find it like, okay, there's information on this of I'm helping her build her hormonal health for the rest of her life right now. So I'm, block out all the junk about saturated fat killing you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she's very lucky to have you. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
And on the topic of like hiding things away in the cabinets, where this will probably air in mid-February, and we're coming off of World Carnivore Month. And I just wanted to get your opinion on how you help clients and people who ask you for advice on cheats and falling off the wagon and how to think about that.
Yeah, it's such a broad topic. It really depends on if this person is an addict or not. You really have to know if you are an abstainer or moderator. And I think we can also lie to ourselves too. And we want to be, one of my friends always says, a moderator never has to ask themselves if they're a moderator or not. They just moderate, An abstainer, they try to trick and convolute. I know I'm an abstainer. I know I have an addictive personality. I know I'm an addict. And so cheating for me it's a bad idea. It's kind of like strapping myself onto the back of a runaway train. I don't know when it's going to stop. I don't know how I'm going to get off. And so I really have to, with people that come to me and say, can I cheat? Should I cheat? I can tell them the biological things of like, you're in ketosis, you want to stay this way. You want to give yourself time away from these foods to let your gut heal, your body heal. That's 1. But 2, what is this going to do to you psychologically? Because when you're an addict, your entire midbrain essentially gets hijacked. Once you have that substance in your mouth, there's a chemical reaction that kicks off. The dopamine's already started because before you even put it in your mouth, you've already kicked that dopamine off. But once it's in your body, if you truly have addiction issues, your whole midbrain has now been hijacked. And so you have less and less control over your choices. So it's kind of like, know yourself, know the biological consequences of not being ketosis or you trying to detox from sugar and you're adding it back in. But if you're a moderator, and you're not trying to heal any chronic autoimmune stuff, okay, then maybe every now and then have a little something if it makes you feel better. But it's it's such a broad and complicated topic.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think knowing yourself is definitely the first step. And also thinking about your goals, right? Like, do you want to be carnivore forever? What does being carnivore mean to you? Do you need to be carnivore forever for a medical condition? And I don't even like using the word cheat because it's like you should own your decision and it should be an intentional decision if you're going to step off the diet and deal with the consequences. But anyway, that's a long topic.
Yeah, it is.
Sarah, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Tell folks where they can find you, where they can learn more about your story and follow your awesome experiments and information and interviews.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. It's been awesome. I appreciate you bringing me back. You can find me on Instagram. It's at carnivore.yogi. I have a YouTube channel. If you just go on YouTube and type in Carnivore Yogi, I'm working on getting my website vamped up and kind of getting a membership site going for people who kind of want to interact with me a bit more off the social media, but don't want to get coaching. They just want a little more interaction. So I'm working on that right now. So that'll be on my website, which is carnivoreyogi.com. I run groups. I've got a group going on Facebook right now. I'll be doing another one in February. So I'm probably going to keep on running groups where I do like group coaching type of stuff and help people that, want to work on food addiction stuff. They want to work on looking to see the other reasons why carnivore is not working for them, or if they need some variation with carnivore. So, or if they've got metabolic down regulation, we look at all that stuff. So those are the best ways to find me, get in touch with me.
Awesome. I'll link to all that in the show notes and at carnivorecast.com. Really appreciate it. Thanks again for your time today, Sarah.
Thanks, Scott.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered? Or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Carnivore Cast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.